Come on, Nigel, we're waiting.
I'll wait
On
for
the
you.
podcast.
Yeah, go. You're the host.
Say hello. Hello, welcome to the Wing It F1
Speak
podcast.
open sesame.
With me, Nigel Chu, your host this evening. Hey, what about those F1 cars, eh?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Winging It F1 podcast. We've been talking about Doctor Who for some reason. I don't know why.
David Tennant.
We're not prepared at all.
David
for this
Tennant.
week's episode. Huh?
David Tennant.
David Tennant. Don't know who that is. Is he Scottish?
God.
I'm joking. Of course I know who he is. Before we start, though, I just want to say, this is getting serious now. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's watched and listened to our latest episode because we did very well. Shout out to our teacher, Michelle, who some people won't know, but if you do know her, thank you, because she gave us a shout out in a masterclass lecture thing. Freddie wasn't there, but I was. So it's going to be what someone noticed. But yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for anyone who's watched and listened recently. And if you haven't, well, you must be because you're listening to this now. Joining me, as always, is Reddy and Adam. What have you two been up to that you can say on the podcast that won't get you sacked? Yeah, what have you been up to?
Well, I mean, if we're doing shout-outs, I'll give a shout-out to the person who I bumped into in the queue for the toilets at a club the other day, and he said, "Oh, and are you British?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, do you like F1?" And I said, "Yeah, I do a podcast on it." And then he subscribed to the podcast. So if you're listening, I don't know your name, but thanks for being along for the ride.
Oh, yeah, if we're doing shout-outs, I'll give a shout-out to David Tennant for coming back to Doctor Who.
There we go. David Tennant, Michelle Rawlins.
The circle is closed.
Adam bumped into the toilet. Yeah.
Hello. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope he's living up to your expectations.
Oh, yeah, he will.
All of this.
He's the best Doctor. I mean, of course, he'll live up to my expectations.
Oh, God. As long as we're not talking about Eurovision. Right.
I enjoyed that. That was great fun.
Moldova were great. I felt bad that they didn't win because, obviously Ukraine, it was a great story, but Moldova were fantastic.
It came just at the right time in the evening. Everyone up after all the ballads. I thought Sweden did very well as well, and they deserved all the votes.
I thought Graham Norton maybe went on a bit too long about all the ballads, though. His saying, "Oh, we've had a long run of ballads after everyone," was more annoying than the ballads themselves. I thought the ballads
were quite good.
Yeah,
I really liked Germany, and then they got 0 from the judges. I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have liked Germany, but I like that.
Well, I mean, Britain got 0 last year, and now we're in second. So there's hope. Next year, come again.
Exactly. It went very well. This is like when we didn't win the Euros.
Well, right. Except a load of Italians didn't get beaten up afterwards.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah,
maybe
it's actually much better than.
It's probably best that we didn't host Eurovision next year because of the Eurovision hooliganism.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, that's a minute. I have no idea what those two were talking about. Let's talk about F1 because that's what we're here for. Let's first talk about the championship. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc. Now, I was thinking, it might just be me, but it does feel a bit less intense this year, the battle between those two compared to Lewis Hamilton and Verstappen last year. Is that something that you also feel the same way about? Adam, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think so. It feels like the teams are winning on the tracks where they should be winning on. And I don't know, it just kind of feels less intense, and there's not the kind of the rivalry off the track that there was last season, but it just, I guess the stakes don't seem as high. Whereas last season it was Mercedes going for the clean sweep of the era from 2014, and you had Red Bull who've been down for 8 years trying to stop them, and you had the storyline of Hamilton, who's been the multi-world champion, and Verstappen as the kind of pretender trying to take that crown and become the biggest driver in the sport and dethrone him. And this year there doesn't seem to be that. There's Verstappen's got his championship, Red Bull have got their championship. There's not, I guess, the same overcoming the kind of recent history of not being there. and then you've got Ferrari who are just it kind of seems positive about Ferrari, but it doesn't feel like really. It doesn't feel the same way that it did with Red Bull last year, where they really felt like they were kind of desperate to win the championship this season. It doesn't feel like the same stakes are there to me.
Now, Freddie, I know in our awkward conversations you feel differently. Explain why.
Yeah, when Nigel pitched this question to me before the pod, I thought it was a bit of a non-event question because if I think back to, Adam's right about talking about it was taking down the juggernaut of Mercedes and so on. But if I think back to sort of the main sort of flashpoints of that year, of that championship fight, they were so late and there was so much sort of time had gone past through that year. It seemed like it was going to slip away from both of them. Whereas at this point, we're only 5 races in. If I think back to sort of the 5th race last year, there was the odd kind of jibe between Lewis and Max. I think it would have been Monaco, and it would have been, I think Lewis said something along the lines of, "Oh, don't want to get in Max's head," and then Max said, "Well, you don't," and that was it. Like, it's nothing. And at that kind of point, as a championship fight, it wasn't that intense at this point of that season. So I kind of think as a question, it's kind of like championship fights get really intense when the championship's closer. And in such a long championship season, I think there's every chance that this could become quite a desperate championship. I think you're not going to get desperation for a championship this early in the season. Yeah, they all want to win, but it's very much about sort of getting a score on the board early so that you can have the desperation later down the line. So that's my opinion on that.
I think looking back, I mean, you just had so much, the first 2 races were Bahrain and Imola. And, in those 2, you had kind of massive swings. You had, one of the best season openers ever in Bahrain, and Red Bull kind of losing out through Max, running off marginally. And then you had Imola where they came together at the first corner and then Hamilton kind of slid off, trying to chase Max down. So to me, the last season's championship, the really fallow bit was really from that kind of middle stretch of Baku, Paul Ricard, and the 2 Austria races. But I think it seemed to start off very well. And even in the beginning, it just felt like, the teams, it just kind of felt life or death between the 2 teams and the 2 drivers. Whereas it doesn't, obviously they still want to win, but there's not that same feeling of them needing to win with every fibre of every team member's body that I got from last year's championship. And I think that was present through the first 5 races where, you had them going to wheel through the first 4. And then Monaco, where Monaco was kind of the big, that's the first race that Mercedes just slipped up on majorly for a while. So, I think there was that intensity earlier on.
I don't know. I think it was no different to sort of the intensity that you would have in most championships for me personally. But yeah, I mean, we did get to Baku, and that was where they started with all the Christian's a windbag, all that kind of stuff on TV, and all the wings and so the flexi wing debate and so on, which to be fair was a bit there at race 5 as well. But I kind of feel like there's always these kind of underlying things throughout a lot of the top class. And I think it's definitely safe to say there is a different relationship between from Red Bull to Mercedes than Red Bull to Ferrari in this kind of position. But I don't think that this championship is going to lack intensity if it stays close like it has been with Charles and Max throughout. I think the intensity is only going to be there. But I just think it's a symptom of the fact that it's not kind of a point where we're at like, oh God, we've got 3 races to go, and if I lose this race, I lose everything. Not, oh, there's so much that it's inforeseeable to kind of quantify the future races.
When we got to Monaco last year, we were saying that, oh, Verstappen had to win Monaco. It doesn't really feel like that. And, this is even though despite the clone of Verstappen this year, they've been wheel to wheel in each of the 5 events, if you include like the sprint race and Imola and stuff like that, and last year, it was the same with the first 4. So,
but we said that because Lewis has had his best ever start to a season. That's why we said that. He was on 94 points after 4 races. If you think about it from that perspective, he's only dropped 10 points. So that's why we're looking at that, saying if Max wants to keep the championship alive, he needs to win. That's a different thing to talking about them sniping at each other all the time and the way the racing was in sort of Brazil and stuff, where it actually was, for me, sort of, and Saudi, where it was, desperately intense.
I think
Go on.
I think for me, the way I'd sum it up is last season, it almost felt like the championship was a sideshow to Red Bull wanting to beat Mercedes and Mercedes wanting to beat Red Bull. It felt like the competition was that they wanted to beat each other. It doesn't feel like there's that same needing to beat the other team this season. It feels like they're racing for the championship, but not, there's not that same level of just really that need that you clearly felt through the whole of last season to really beat the other team, and the other team being a factor in that drive to win, I think.
Do you think there's a question of that, just the fact that it was such a long period of us as fans as not really having that kind of battle at the front? 2019 and 2020 had been, particularly 20, had been such a walk from Mercedes that maybe it just felt more intense because there was another opportunity for someone to win.
No, I think I think it maybe feels more. I think the fact that we had such an intense season last season is taking away from this season. So yeah, I think kind of in a roundabout way, yeah, but I don't think that's down to the fans. I think that's kind of down to the teams more so.
I think the way I describe it is football fans will get it. If you don't watch football, I'm sorry, but it feels like how
as my American friend,
it feels like Ferrari and Red Bull is a bit like Man City and Liverpool right now. Those are the top two teams right now. They're on head to head, but it's not quite the same as Arsenal and Man United from like 2003 or Arsenal and Liverpool.
Or Man United, Man City in 2012.
Yeah, or something like that. It doesn't feel quite, that's how I see it. The intensity or the rivalry is not quite as big between Red Bull and Ferrari as it is with Mercedes and Red Bull. It's like with football, Man City, Liverpool, and then Liverpool United, or Man United, Arsenal, or whatever. That's how I kind of see it. I also think
that's a point where that can still develop. It's that kind of thing, and I think it's hard to judge a championship fight in race 5 of 23.
It felt like it had developed to that point by this stage last season, I think.
But I think for that is like all the stuff I've already said, basically, that because it came with such a baggage from the fact that this was the first championship since 2016 that wasn't really a walkover for Hamilton.
I think the biggest
changes everything.
The biggest difference for me is this year, Verstappen seems to be racing Leclerc differently. I don't know if that's because of the cars or because we can follow closer, but he doesn't seem as aggressive compared to the Imola and Spain instance with Hamilton last year. I don't really see him doing that at all, unless it gets to a desperate time. That is the big thing for me. There seems to be a lot more respect between Leclerc and Verstappen. So I think that for me is where the rivalry is not lacking, because it's still a great fight, but it's just not quite the same almost.
We'll have to wait and see really with that. I wouldn't be surprised if that changes at races or stays the same. I wouldn't be surprised if you have because if you look at it for sort of Bahrain, there was between Lewis and Max, the racing was so different to in Saudi at the end of the year. So who knows? We'll have to and you could say that this year Saudi was getting close to being close to where it was in terms of racecraft, in terms of fighting for DRS lines and so on. I mean, it wasn't, of course, as tight as it was with brake chesting and stuff like that. But who knows? We don't know what's going to happen at the end of this year.
Do you think Verstappen is racing or treating Leclerc differently to Hamilton?
I think he's racing as a champion now.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's racing differently. I'm not sure how much to put that down to him having a champion's experience behind him versus.
I mean, a championship fight, if that makes sense.
I think there's still
a bit of kind of knowledge of how he went too far.
I think that there is an element of it being against Leclerc rather than Hamilton, and all the stuff we've already covered about those, the Mercedes versus Ferrari aspect. But I also think a significant part of that is coming from, his experience of the championship and just maturing as another another year as a driver, I think.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting one. Yeah, let us know what you think if you're listening to and watching to this, because it is an interesting talk, but we will see how it develops. And I think, the final thing on the championship, it seems like Leclerc is one of the most likable drivers on the grid, and I'm just wondering why that is.
Nice guy.
That's a random question, I know. I just
But it's very obvious, isn't it? He's just a very lovely gentleman, isn't he? And he doesn't do anything that really ruffles people up. He's incredibly polite. He's incredibly effusive and just is charming and funny and nice, isn't he? So,
because I think that's another
nice
reason.
Guy.
I think that's another reason why it feels a bit different as well. Because it seems like everyone likes Leclerc, whereas obviously we know about Verstappen, Hamilton, polarizing fans and stuff like that. So I think that's another reason, because Leclerc's so popular amongst fans and drivers. That again is another thing, I think. Yeah. Adam?
Yeah, I think with Leclerc, I guess he's not really been in that intense situation because he was at Sauber and then at Ferrari when they weren't kind of in that championship fight. So, I wonder kind of how many more kind of creases in his personality, or when there is a divisive incident, which there will be at some point in his career, and most likely this season between him and his title challenger, kind of how that will change the perception of him, really.
So that's the last of the Leclerc Verstappen talk for now, but we will come back to it obviously because they are the title protagonists. We will be talking about the Spanish Grand Prix, but first let's talk about a Spanish driver. No, not Carlos Sainz or Carlos Sainz Jr. It's Fernando Alonso, obviously. Well, not obviously because you didn't know, but you might have known, but you didn't know, but you probably did know.
Only people will be people who have access to our planning doc, and that is maybe three other people in the world. So
anyway, Fernando Alonso, he's only scored 2 points this year. He's not had the best season. Where do you think he's kind of at? Because Alpine have had some great races, but then Alonso's not been there to pick up the points because of reliability issues or incidents and stuff like that. So, I guess it's a frustrating season for him so far already.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, with it being Fernando Alonso, it's been the most frustrating and the most sort of missed opportunities of all time from the greatest moments of ever. But of course, I'm exaggerated a bit there. But yeah, I think there's been a multitude of missed opportunities, some from his fault and some not his fault. And, that seems to be just a perfect storm for why he's got more penalty points than points this year. And he's definitely been the faster driver. He was much faster in Saudi when he fought really hard with Ocon and got ahead and pulled away and then broke down. He was putting him to shade in Australia when he was on a lap, arguably good enough for at least second on the grid. And Ocon was nowhere in comparison. And then his gear shift ratios, whatever it was, messed up. Hydraulic gear stuff, problems. He had problems. And
don't we all?
He was doing quite well in Imola. He got fifth in the original qualifying, but he just got caught out at the start in the way many people did with the different side of the grids and so on. And then he had some really good showing in Miami, but it just sort of fell apart with a ridiculous send on Gasly, basically, that then put him into kind of red mist, get penalties mood. And all that kind of stuff is, there's so much potential. Again, with Fernando, we know he's a fast driver. He's just not putting A and B together. He's just doing everything, but not continuously. And, he's always been this El Matador, Samurai, all that kind of stuff, whatever he likes to be seen. I know El Matador's Carlos Sainz Senior, but anyway.
Samurai Matadors.
Yeah, he's got a samurai tattoo, doesn't he? I'm not sure. And he's always been that kind of big, flamboyant, I am God kind of guy. And he's been a lot better at being more of a mortal since he did WEC, in my opinion. I've spoken about that before. that he understands a team now. Now he's 40, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. There's not really more, I think, from my side that I think he can do to try and get these results. I think there's just a lot of throwing itself up against him, and he's getting a bit more frustrated as it goes. And I think Barcelona and Monaco are the perfect races coming up for him to be able to get a kind of handle on it, because no one can overtake him.
Yeah, if he qualifies as he has, then he's got a great chance of getting top 5s, top 6s. So yeah, Adam, your thoughts?
I mean, that it's exactly that. To be honest, I think he's reached Q3 4 out of the 5 races, and in Miami he was 300th off making it. So I think you don't fail to convert that into more than 2 points without a big slice of bad luck and or fortune turning against you, and just things not going your way. And I kind of put it down to that. I mean, particularly Australia, I think they could have been on for a really strong result before he binned it. And, he's had, particularly the retirement in Saudi where he looked like he was on for a strong result. And, that really should have been the one to kickstart his season, really, but it's not. So, yeah, I don't put it down to Alonso fading at all. I think he needs to not kind of let that frustration come through. But at Barcelona, in front of his home fans, it's always been, there's always, I forget the area that he's from, but the blue background with the yellow cross on, and that's always filled the stands at Barcelona whenever he's been racing. So I feel optimistic for it, really. And then, like you say, Monaco, he knows how to get around there, and if he can qualify well and the car stays together, then he should be fine. So I think it's I completely empathise that it's very frustrating for him, but as I say, I don't think you qualify in Q3 for 4 out of the 5 races, and then don't score the points. I don't think that's anything more than bad luck is the most significant factor to me.
I think he's been better than teammate Esteban Ocon this year. Not much better, but definitely better. It's just he hasn't had the results to show it yet. And I think he will. I think, Adam, you mentioned that before the start of the season that he might win a race or something, Alonso, with some luck and stuff like that. And that could still happen because Alpine have got a decent car.
Yeah.
So I think
with that engine in Baku as well, I know it's still a few weeks away, but that with half the track being a straight,
and Montreal,
I'd expect them to go very well there. Yes, yeah, good point.
Yeah, so I think Alonso, and even though he's got this kind of character where he might show his displeasure and stuff like that, he never ever lets it get to him when he's out on the track. He always delivers, no matter how bad a period he's gone through. He's been through McLaren, Honda, and he's been through feuds on and off the track and stuff like that. And he always delivers on the track, and he's just so difficult to beat. So I don't. Yeah, he's still driving very well, just as well as last year. I think last year he was fantastic. So I think it's just a matter of time as to when the good results are going to come, and I don't think it will ever affect him. No matter how bad or how unlucky he's kind of been. So yeah, I think he's still one of the top drivers. Hasn't shown it yet. How long do we think he's going to be around in F1 for?
I was just about to ask you guys that.
Well, I've just asked you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, speak.
Okay. A couple more years. Genuinely.
A couple more years.
Genuinely
Still at Alpine?
If they'll have him, yeah. I mean, maybe Aston Martin. They always sniff around at Fernando Alonso, apparently. And he keeps saying, put me in the Red Bull, and all that kind of stuff, apparently, as well. He's got his manager's Flavio Briatore, so he's going to be whiling around like a little fox, because that's just the way Flavio is and the way Fernando is. And they'll I think Alpine's the best bet. That seems to be always his sort of savior team.
Yeah.
And they
obviously safety home.
Yeah, they're obviously seeing how good he's doing, and they know how well he can perform against Esteban. They've got Esteban signed on for a couple more years yet. So why not keep the driver who's performing better than the one you've got signed on? I think really the whole question of Alonso's seat then lends itself to the question of Piastri's seat, which I find a way more interesting sort of rabbit hole to go down, which sort of lent arises from this conversation.
I've talked about that. Well, in fact, we've not talked about Piastri all year.
No, yeah, but
Situation. Yeah, we want to. Adam, what are your thoughts about Piastri, about what he should do? Because obviously he's taken this year out. Well, not a year out. He's a reserve driver for Alpine, but how is he going to find a seat on the grid next year?
So firstly, I just want to say a cool stat that Alonso's changed teams since he started at Renault. He's changed teams a further 5 times in his career. Yet he's only been at 3 teams. I just find it. I just find it fascinating that he's bounced around this little echo chamber of Renault and McLaren and Ferrari. Yeah, on Piastri, I think it's going to be a difficult one when Alonso's performing as well as he is, because to be honest, with Piastri coming in, if he could perform at Alonso's level, that'd be a very good kind of first 3 seasons for him.
That'd be unbelievable.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be difficult. It's a tough one because, if you get rid of Alonso, you have a very real possibility and likelihood that Piastri coming in will not be able to match that, especially in the first season. But even, after he's got his feet under the table a bit more, it'd still be not a given that he makes it there. So, yeah, I think it's a really difficult one. And I think it'd be best for Piastri to kind of find a seat, at another team. There should be teams on the grid that want him because he's a fantastic racer and he's the biggest name in feeder series racing, even though he's not in feeder series racing right now. So, yeah, I think the best thing for him would be going to a different team because, if he was going to Alpine, I think they'd be better off putting him in alongside Alonso instead of Ocon personally than the other way around. But either way, I think it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a difficult one for them to manage. So, yeah.
It's a really hard one, isn't it? I feel like Ocon hasn't been driving bad enough to warrant dismissal either. And it's just because you've just got Piastri in the wings that it's brought up. But Ocon's had some mega race drives this year.
He's down till the end of 2024 as well.
Yeah, so exactly. So, I mean, it's going to cost a lot to get rid of him. And I think because Ocon is really bringing in points this year really well, that lends itself to keep Ocon, definitely. But where do you think there's a gap for Piastri? Do you guys think there is one?
They've got to loan him out somewhere. It's tricky for Alpine because they don't have a natural B team.
Yeah.
But I think they've got to give him, unless Andretti will allow it 2024, won't it?
That's still rumours. Anyway.
So I think they've got to give him out to whether that's an Alfa Romeo or a Williams or Haas or something like that. And they're just, having this contract that he can return to Alpine at a certain time or after a year or 2 or something like that. I think that is the best way because, you can't have 2 years out of the sport, F2 champion, F3 champion in his first season. Someone of that kind of quality and talent. For him to, if he isn't in F1 next year, that's a disgrace, quite frankly, of the whole entire feeder series system. For someone that good to not be in F1 is unacceptable. So the Alpine have to put him somewhere. Where that's going to be, I think it's probably a bit too early to say, but I'm sure talks are going on at the moment.
Oh yeah, they are.
What can happen? I've seen stuff about mid-season swaps and stuff like that. For this year, but I don't think that will happen. Although you never know. But yeah, I think he's got to go somewhere else. My guess is Williams.
That was what I was thinking.
It feels the logical gap.
Yeah,
it's a good kind of yardstick of going up against Albon as well.
Particularly,
I bet that he should replace Albon. I'm joking.
No, but you actually did mean that.
Albon is arguably the driver whose stock's risen the most this year of all of them. And you could say that Tsunoda's stock's risen enough as well to warrant himself staying on, as you could, if you would say after the past 5 races. I would keep Tsunoda as a measure of these races. So there's not really a gap at AlphaTauri for Red Bull to snatch him up because they like doing that.
Coming in, if Magnussen moves on, then Haas would be a good landing spot for him, I think.
Magnussen's not moving on. He's got a 2-year deal.
If he is.
Martin is possible, I think.
I can see Aston Martin, particularly with just sort of relations in Alpine.
I mean,
so
do,
on.
do we think he'll definitely be on the grid next year? Like 99%.
This is
No.
the least confident I've been.
I
Really?
think there's.
Yeah.
I think it's 50-50. I think it might. I don't know. I think it's really, and going back to what you said, Nigel. I don't think it's a disgrace to the feeder series system. I think there are a lot of problems with feeder series racing, but the fact that Piastri was able to get up to the level he did is a kind of triumph for the feeder series system. The problem is F1.
Yeah.
Sorry,
And
yeah.
there's
you're
only
right. Yeah,
there's only
I
10
think it
teams.
is a serious system, F1.
Yeah, but I think that's a massive problem, that there's only 10 teams, and at some of those teams you have to have one driver in who's bringing in the money, and then there's the established drivers in. So every season you're kind of talking maybe 5 seats as possibilities of becoming available, and I think that's the real problem is where it's at with that. So yeah,
I feel
I'm not confident at all. I think 50-50 is where I'm at.
I feel we're at a kind of glory point, you could say, because there's always the pay driver debate, but I feel like we're kind of
This is the best grid I've ever seen.
Yeah, this is the best grid, and definitely in terms of saying, if you want to split between pay driver and non-pay driver, every driver at one point in their career is a pay driver. But anyway, like for definite kind of an F1 team to go, he's mega, we'll have him. I think this is the most amount of drivers who have had that kind of sort of mindset, professional drivers, you could say then, that the team have hired them to drive rather than sort of being persuaded to run them. I think you've got noticeable exceptions to that, but I think it's really small in comparison to where it has been in previous 70 years.
I think as well it feels like maybe Piastri's peaked. It maybe feels like he's come along 3 or 4 years too early, because the teams you were talking about, or the names that could be entering the sport, from VW Group and beyond, Andretti potentially coming in kind of later down the line. If that was happening now, they would be biting his agent's hand off to sign him up. So I think the fact that it feels unfortunate for him that he's coming along now, where most of the people on the grid are established drivers, or kind of people who have real potential and have that pedigree, maybe not as big as Piastri's pedigree, but do have pedigree from their time either in F1 or before that. So I think it's really tough. He just seems to be coming in at quite a bad time for someone in his position.
But then this time last year, I don't think any of us would have said Joe Guan Yu, Alfa Romeo, and Alex Albon Williams, and even Nick de Vries being thrown around for both of those seats as well. So there is hope for that. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen as well as a name that's just popped up. Like, there's still the F1 driver market is still bonkers, and there's still
Perez was going to Williams.
Yeah, you're right. There's still jokers in the pack that could just completely throw the chaos at it. That makes sense. And we can just, I don't know. I think we can only hope that Piastri ends up in Formula One. That's all we can do right now. It's just a shame that we've got a very high performing grid. I think there's noticeable exceptions, but the Latifi conundrum is one that, I think it feels like, mid-season driver changes happen less and less now, but with a longer season, you think it should happen more and more, in my opinion. But anyway, so who knows where that ends up later down the line. But I don't really know. I think the silly season for next year is incredibly open.
Yeah, I agree. It's open every year, but it does feel more open this year. And I think the last point for me on Piastri is I hope he doesn't kind of get jumped in the queue by current F2 drivers, people like Porsche, who deserve to be on the grid, of course, but it kind of feels like Piastri got there first kind of thing, so he should be first, but it might not always work out like that. And Porsche is linked to Alfa Romeo and things like that, so he might get a seat and Piastri might not. So yeah, we'll just have to see. But it's certainly an interesting one. It's a great position in a way for these kind of feeder series to be in, because they've created so many great drivers. But F1, it's always been like this with these not having the best drivers kind of thing. And yeah, unfortunately, Piastri has been as the latest driver on that list. So yeah,
I think I'm not as worried about F2 because outside of Porsche, it feels like a lot of drivers on the grid are maybe ones whose star is fading or who haven't lived up to the heights
a long way
expected.
to go in the season, though. It was a long way. Like if someone gets on a run and stuff like that, it can massively.
Yeah,
change.
I agree, but you're talking.
Mature, isn't it? It's a different question for different drivers sometimes. But naturally, you have some who just pop up and deserve more. You're right.
But there's no one besides Porsche. There's no one that I'm looking on at the grid thinking, "Wow, they really need to be in F1." It's not. There's not that kind of
you
level.
Would have said that about someone like Tsunoda when he was in F2. Like after what? How many rounds has it been? Three rounds or something like that. I don't think you would have said that for someone like Tsunoda or for Zhou last year. Stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I kind of don't. But I think Zhou's in. I think there are more drivers in Zhou's position where Zhou, it wasn't like, wow, he's the coming thing. It was Zhou, and he's got F2 experience and Chinese backing, and he'll get on the grid. There are more drivers in that position, I think, than ones where you just think, it could, like Leclerc, that it completely blows you away what they've done in feeder series, and then they should get on the grid because of that.
I think people like Vips and Lawson, if they got on the grid and if they keep performing as they are, I would happily say, right, they deserve to be on the grid. So there's another two names, as well as and stuff like that.
But I'm on about drivers who make it impossible for them not to be on the grid in any reasonable way, and I think Porsche is the only one of them. Whereas Piastri, there's no reason he shouldn't be on the grid.
Any thoughts ready on that? Or
I think obviously it does seem to be who you align with, and there's been particularly this year a lot of popularity for drivers of trying to end up with the Alpine Academy, simply because of the time you get in an F1 car, just in general. For Piastri and Jack Doohan have driven an Alpine F1 car this past week just gone, and those are opportunities that never sort of afforded themselves through that easily, that sort of in such a developmental perspective from other teams like a Williams Academy or a Mercedes Academy, unless you were the definite hot shot that they want. So I think it really just depends on where these drivers are at, because I think we can sit here for hours speaking about who's shown flashes of what, and whether your Doohans or your Sargents are all they were made up to be in F3 and Haugers when they were absolutely fantastic in those seasons. But whether it's just whether that's flash in the pants or not, I mean, that's a whole bigger thing. And you're right, Nigel, it's too early in the season to tell, and it's too kind of filled as we all think with career Formula 2 drivers, your Boschungs and your Nissanis and stuff, who are kind of what's the word, sort of contaminating the results, you could say. And you could even throw a Vips into that, who knows? But anyway, and it's all of the day. It's all, well, who's fashionable, and Piastri is still fashionable. His performances have enabled that, and I think that was what worked with Tsunoda, in the fact that he was so young and where he was. It made him fashionable. So we all have to wait and see, but it does look like the Alpine Academy is failing at its first big test.
Yeah, definitely. I'm certainly not fashionable. So anyway,
and just one final thing of that, like Lundgaard's gone. Lundgaard's gone to America and is kind of completely moved on from that. And I think you're right. Piastri is the first big test, but Lundgaard looked like he could be that for a year or so. So yeah, I think that's
him, to be fair, but
Nigel did.
Nigel,
yeah,
him and Porsche.
But yeah, I think when you combine those two, I think, like you say, the Alpine Academy has fantastic benefits coming up as a junior driver. But I think, when drivers are looking at the results of the two biggest names they've had, and you've got Zhou, who didn't really get in through the academy, and then Lundgaard and Piastri, who have so far failed to get seats, I think that's significant.
Yeah, there is F2 this weekend as usual, but there's also the F1. Of course, it is the Spanish Grand Prix. I think it's the only track outside of the UK where two of us have been to. Is that right? Outside of the UK?
Has anyone been to Le Mans?
I've not been to Le Mans.
I've not been to Le Mans.
There we go then. Yeah.
There it is. It is. Spa, no.
Hungaroring?
No.
No, then I think so. I think it is.
Yeah, there we go. That's a fun fact. Useless fact. Yeah, useless fact as well. Bit like this podcast. No, I'm joking. Right. So, Spanish Grand Prix.
Adam, you've been to New York?
Yes.
Did you see the Formula E track in Brooklyn from a building? Probably. Just say yes.
Yeah, I went to Brooklyn.
There we go. We've both seen the Formula E track in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's ruined the facts now. It's ruined the pocket. It's ruined
It's the only F1 track. Yeah. Still.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen this weekend then? Lots of upgrades are going to be coming. So for me,
beep, beep.
It makes it even more impossible to predict what's going to happen because this is Ferrari's first big upgrade package. It's about whether it works, and if it does work, how effective is it going to be? Red Bull are going to cut weight as well, even more after they did that a couple of weekends ago at Imola. So again, we got to see how much time that sheds. So, is there any hunches that you guys have? It's going to be dry as well, so we'll get a true pecking order as well.
Yes, McLaren will be good.
McLaren will be good.
And F1 will happen. That is all I have to say.
What do you have to say, Adam Dickinson?
Guan Yu Zhou will be good because last week was a non-starter. So this week, he's going to be good. No, I have no idea. I mean, yeah, am I right in saying Ferrari brought some upgrades to Miami and then took them off before turning a wheel?
Yeah, they took them off, yeah.
So
they did the same in Imola as well, but that's because that was a sprint weekend and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that just that says more that they should have them nailed this weekend, to be honest, after they've had another fortnight to work on them. But
or a tricky we don't
path. We don't know. Fundamentally, we don't know.
No, it's fun. Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing, and I know we go on about it every week, but this is the last chance for Mercedes for me. If Mercedes are not doing well this weekend, then I will finally say they are out of the title contention. Because so far, I've always said, wait until Spain. We're at Spain now, so if they're not within 2-3 tenths in qualifying and in the race, if they're not in the leading pack, then they can forget this year. So that's the most interesting thing for me is whether Mercedes can finally get it right. It's unlikely, but there's still something there in me thinking it might happen. So I think for me, that's the most interesting thing that I'm looking out for. Is there anything else you guys are looking out for before we round off?
I think, well, it's obviously what you've just said, but I think
brilliant.
I think it's just on Merck. I don't know how much it's wishful thinking to even think there's still a hope for them now, but it's a really hard one to kind of quantify because yes, Spain is the sort of spiritual homecoming for the development side of Formula One teams, but it's still like at the end of the day they've got to do all the work there for then the future races, if that makes sense. It's like it's not necessarily plug in and play this weekend.
Yeah.
So I don't think, even though I think I've probably written off Mercedes, to be honest, but I don't think if there's any weekend to write them off, it should definitely be this one, because I think this is definitely the one where they can definitely learn things and get the most information out of it, rather than based on comparing and contrasting to Barcelona's pre-season test and so on.
Yeah.
So I think it sets up for future races is potentially even more interesting than the pecking order this weekend.
Final thoughts, Adam?
Final thoughts are a question.
Oh, that's a good thought.
So it's 10 years since Pastor Maldonado's win in Spain.
Yes.
So where do you think Williams are going to finish?
Oh, well, they got points last time out, didn't they? I don't think they're going to get points this weekend.
you think they're going to win?
No.
They're going to win with no points.
Yeah, that will be good. Yeah. I think they'll. It's difficult, isn't it? I think they'll do well to get out of Q1. I'm going to say.
I have no idea, mate. To be honest, I think they've been benefiting from sort of strategy that going long and sort of staying out and stuff like that. And that's a strategy that famously works quite well at Barcelona. So I wouldn't discount them from points from that kind of poor qualifying, good race car kind of thing. I think both drivers you could throw into that mix, actually, based on where that strategy's worked in the past, with like your Ericssons and your Wehrleins and stuff like that. Who I think are both quite good drivers, actually. But anyway,
here we go. Every driver in the world's good.
Every driver. Brendan Hartley. He was underrated by the F1 world.
Oh, I love this driver. I love every driver. I love everyone in the world. That's Freddie Coates for you.
Every other weekend. There was F1 released some I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's like best team radios of the year or something like that. And like 50% of them were, or it was like biggest crashes or something, and 50% of them were Hartley crashing, and then his engineer going, "Brendan, are you okay?" And you go, "Yeah, man, I'm all right." And that was that was half the video. There was like an 8-minute YouTube video, and half of it was just Brendan Hartley's engineer going, "Are you okay?"
I can like him though. What was I saying?
Williams.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, Williams. Nah,
I think you said
They'll just exist. They'll beat Aston Martin.
They're not going to go bust. That's the prediction.
They just exist, just like we exist, and just like you exist for listening and watching this podcast. Thank you for listening and
That's
watching.
existential. Are we not going to guess he's going to win?
No, we're not.
Oh.
Yeah, we're not. Leclerc, there you go, right. It's too late.
Yeah.
I'm doing the outro.
No, we're staging a coup.
No, I'm doing the outro. Thank you.
Bloody mutiny.
Follow us on Twitter.
Freddie can decide when the recording ends, though.
Yeah, I can decide how I edit this.
Yeah.
Subscribe and all that. Like,
what's your podium, Freddie?
Thank you.
My podium. So Sainz, Verstappen, Leclerc.
I'll go Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz. It's really boring one.
I've
but
not
it was
seen
worth
that
it.
one before.
I'm going to say goodbye, and we'll see you next week.
No.
See ya.
No.